Welcome to everyone tuning in. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Glen Goland. I am an investment advisor and wealth strategist here at Arnerich, Massena. We are a Portland-based investment advisory firm bringing our unique and disciplined process to wealthy families, nonprofit endowments, and foundations. Today's podcast is geared towards those families. It's one topic that is often discussed in our family meetings is divorce. Divorce has shaped the finances of many of the families that we work with, and protecting assets from some future divorce is a common area of concern. Today, I'm happy to be joined by Lara Brunstrom. She is a CDC divorce transition and recovery coach and is a certified life coach. Lara is the owner of Sterling Fire Coaching, where she works with men and women to provide clarity to the divorce process and to help them focus on what their lives look like post-divorce. Lara earned her master's degree in education from San Francisco State and is trained at Coaches Training Institute in San Rafael, California. Lara, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. It is a thrill to get to talk to you. After having a number of great referrals, it's great to finally connect and get the chance to meet you face to face. Divorce is a bit of a black box for a lot of the folks that we work with. That is, they know what it is and they understand it generally, but the process itself is sort of a mystery. Can you walk us through what an individual should expect from a process standpoint once they've made a decision to end their marriage?
I can. There's so many options that it would probably take us many episodes to go through all of them. However, I think if we back up just a little bit, one of the first things to realize is when people hit the point that they have decided to get divorced, there's a statistic that on average couples wait 6 years to reach out for help. So
Wow.
knowing that, yeah, wow, right? So knowing that when they're finding you as a financial advisor to help them unravel things or divide things, or they're searching for their best route on how to take apart their marriage and rebuild their future, go through the divorce process, in other words, knowing and understanding that they're coming to you at a place of frustration and maybe a little beaten down, where I have clients tell me all the time, I've been white knuckling it for 6 years. I've just put my head down and I've just been going forward. So when it comes time for them to make that decision, there's a lot of emotion attached to that. So there's options, and people don't realize that there's options a lot of times. So the process can look different depending on what option they pick. Not everybody needs to lawyer up. People can use a mediation route. They can use a collaborative divorce route. They can use a combination. So depending on which fork in the road they decide to head down, that's going to unravel what the process is going to look like for them. And knowing that each person comes to, like, if they find me and we talk about where they're at, some people are shocked. I mean, like, others have been through a unhappy marriage for 6 years and they haven't reached out. Let's use that statistic. Others have been blindsided and they're like, I had no idea something was wrong. So either way, ton of emotion.
Sure.
Each couple's coming to the process from a different angle, and there's going to be different ways that are going to work for them.
Got it.
So the unraveling of that, the biggest thing is having your decision making in order. Knowing that first decision on what path you want to take with your partner, is that going to be lawyers? Is it going to be mediators? Is it going to be collaborative? Understanding what those processes look like, doing your homework.
And is that primarily driven by assets or animosity or both? Or
I would say emotion and animosity for sure. Assets are going to be a huge part. I mean, there's the business of divorce and there's the emotion of divorce. Everybody's going to go through, like, anybody going through a divorce is going to have both of those. So when I coach, we say I coach the person and I coach the process. Part of coaching the process is where financial advisors come in, knowing where your finances are, knowing what you have, knowing what that looks like to separate it, knowing if you start with $4 million and you're dividing that in half, what is your future like with 2 as opposed to $4 million? That's a window to look through. as you're going down this path. And that's the earlier involving people who can do that for you, like you guys, the better.
Got it. Well, that's reassuring to hear, because we have done a bunch of those exercises in my time with this crew, where someone has come in and said, either I was blindsided or not, but the math has dramatically changed overnight. Can you run some numbers for me? And then can you be flexible enough to change those numbers if I call you tomorrow and it decides that the horse trading now involves the IRA instead of the taxable account or whatnot? So that makes sense. So when you say that you're involved in both the personal and the business side of it, can you talk more about sort of how you work through the process and what sort of counsel you provide along the way?
I can. It's, as I said, if I have a divorce coaching client, there's kind of two parts to it. It's one person, but there are times where the process is really frustrating. If they're stuck, they don't even want to look at the numbers to figure out, they don't want to go through expenses. They don't want to do any of this because it's so emotional. So there's that part. And then there's a part of just, who do they want to be? What future are they looking at? What, if not this, then what? And what do you want that future to look like? Because you're going to be in the mud for a while. Divorce is sticky and yucky, and sometimes it can be amicable, but it's hard. Regardless, it's hard. So working with clients on what they want their future to look like, depending on how, as you said, amicable or not amicable the division is. There's a lot of decision making. There's a lot of communication patterns that need to be changed or altered or helped. There's how they want to present themselves through the process. There's what they want, from now focus forward. What do they want their life to look like? And each one of those are huge components.
That's really insightful. I appreciate you walking us through that, because I tend to think of it from my legal background as like, I remember being in meetings with family law attorneys when couples came in and they were at the point where they were lawyering up, right? And so between that and the version of divorce that were fed through the media over the years, like you tend to picture like one spouse getting a notice in the mail, formally being served with papers saying, by the way, life is about to change, right? And that's not, from what you're telling me, that's the tip of the iceberg, and it's the iceberg that's really the important part where you work with them.
There's all different kinds of ways, depending on when I get brought into the process. It could be they're just, the word divorce popped into their head and they're trying to decide what to do. Communication comes along that they decided you don't get to divorce by communicating well with your spouse. Chances are your communication's broken. Also, they're hot buttons. Like, you have spent however many years learning where those buttons are, and it's so tempting to push them through the divorce process. So a lot of my job is to diffuse those. I just recently had a dad who had a weekend. It was his weekend. The ex-wife wanted to have the Shabbat with the children. So she sent this page-long email of what a horrible person he was and all the explicatives that go with it. And no wonder why none of our friends like you. And one of those. And, he wanted to fire back, but the reality is if we can craft a response, which we did, which was 3 sentences long, a 3-sentence long response to a 1-page scathing email, and it diffused it. It's just that communication, coaching people through that, because sword fighting alone is no fun. Like, you're going to get bored. It's no fun. So it's so tempting to pick up the sword and fight with them because you've been doing it, chances are, for years. So
Right.
breaking those patterns, turning it around to a more productive communication, things like that are huge in the process.
Got it. Well, I think our first lesson that listeners can take is no more sword fighting.
Yeah.
Yeah,
no.
Are there
It's
other mistakes or other tips do you have that you recommend as people are going through this process, aside from setting aside the sabers and swords?
Decision making is another big impact, especially when it comes to money. I mean, money is always a hot topic. Kids are a hot topic. As stress builds, our focus tends to narrow. So think of like a flashlight, when you're looking for something in your yard and it's like a wide lens. And as stress builds, we tend to twist that light and kind of make it more laser focus. So we're missing a ton of information. So what happens is as stress builds, we're starting to pinpoint, make decisions that are based on a very brief moment in time. And so part of what I do is widen that lens, widen the light that is going to shine around all the topics of this decision may feel good right now, 10 seconds from now. How does this decision feel 10 days from now? How is it going to impact you 10 years from now? And that's, again, bringing it back to finances and kids. Those are huge decisions to walk away from something or just get frustrated and say, fine, just take it. That may feel good right now and it may relieve the pressure, but that decision 10 years from now financially could be devastating.
Yeah, I've seen that. There have been meetings where I've been sort of kicked under the table by coworkers who have, can you believe that they just said that? And it's like, well, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of emotion going on right now. And so to your point, sometimes people will say really outlandish things or make really, unbalanced financial decisions because of the spur of the moment without thinking of the fact that, well, wait a minute, yeah, money's good right now, but money might not always be good. You might not always have the job that's paying you really well. So don't just say, I got enough money, we can handle it by writing a check and making this problem go away. It's not, that's not the way that it ought to be looked at. So
absolutely. And part of my job too is just pacing people in those negotiations. If there's a mediation where they have the information from their financial advisor, they have a kid plan set up and tensions get sticky or high. I stay accessible to my clients when they're in mediation. We train them up to go into mediation. So the decision making isn't just that hair trigger, like, fine, take it, I'm done, I'm out. The reverse of that is staying until midnight and fighting over the Dyson vacuum. Like, everything's set, yet we're fighting over a vacuum at midnight because they've given so much. So managing those expectations, managing the emotions that go with that, giving them techniques, knowing, are you the person who needs to take a pause and go out and do 50 jumping jacks in the parking lot to center yourself? Like, what gets you centered? Go in with the tools, know how to do it. And have your team. Like, team is huge in this. Your financial advisor, either your attorney or your mediator that you trust. I mean, these are all people, your coach, your therapist, whoever's in your team, making sure that you're all in alignment. And that's a vibe check. That's trusting your financial advisor to make the right decisions for you, trusting your coach that they're going to hold you when you break down, trusting your lawyer has the best interest for you in mind, and they're going to follow the law.
We see that over and over in our business. It's so important because we see transactions regularly that most folks only go through once or twice in their lifetime. But we see a handful of them every year, and so you get used to seeing, like, okay, these are the red flags or the things we ought to look out for, and these are the values that the experts bring to the table in this. Whereas if you're flying through it blind, whether it's divorce or even having a kid or getting married, like all these things, if you're going through it for the first time, you're that much more likely to make mistakes along the way. So thank you. I can totally see how that would be helpful going through that sort of divorce process. Can you give our listeners a sense as we wrap up here as to what sort of other coaching that you do?
I started out as a life coach and went through a horrible divorce of my own. So
Okay.
I did. I spent a lot of years not talking about divorce, and I woke up one day and I was like, holy cow, this is exactly what I need to be talking about. These are exactly the people I want to help. And it came organically. I do regular coaching. So that's for people who are either stuck in a job or they're not happy or fulfilled with something, or just something's missing, or they're post-divorce. And that's kind of what I started seeing, was people who were post-divorce coming to me saying, I don't know. Like, I don't know what I want my future to look like. I didn't craft it. I just went through this process and I'm here. And that's really what nudged me into getting into the divorce part of it.
Interesting.
I say to people all the time, if you didn't need a therapist before divorce and you go through divorce without a coach, you will need a therapist after divorce.
It's an either or. I see.
Yeah, you're going to pick,
Maybe
because
both.
doing it alone it's lame, really. I mean, for a lack of a better word. So there's all kinds of situations. People are new parents. I know you guys do estate planning. You may have a loss in the family and you don't know you're going to divide up money, and you want to listen to your heart. You want to listen to what feels right. And having somebody like me who's neutral, who can walk you through those values and walk you through what your legacy, what do you want it to be? Those are super important questions to have somebody ask other than your friends and family. Somebody who's neutral, who can run through those questions with you, and then they show up to your office and say, "Hey, I know exactly what I want to do. How do I do this?"
Well, that's super important. I mean, if they don't get it from you, then their attorney is going to charge them $200 or $300 an hour to have the same conversation, right? And I know
Exactly.
I used to do that. I know, that's how it works. It's like people come in and they would be really uncentered, and so I totally see where your value would be. So, thank you many times over, Lara, for walking us through this today. You can find Lara over at sterlingfirecoaching.com, and you can always visit our website at arnerichmassena.com, where you'll find details about our team and a blog where we post relevant articles about financial planning topics. Thank you, Lara, so much for being here today, and thank you to our audience for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to Arnerich Massena's podcast. Please see the podcast description for important copyright and disclaimer information.